Far Cry 7 has not officially been confirmed yet, but plenty of leaks and rumors have surfaced about the game. That said, take everything I discuss in this video with a grain of salt. Most of this information is reliable while some may not be. I will leave links down below to all source material mentioned in this video. Now, I previously made a video titled How Far Cry 6 Ruined the Franchise because I genuinely believe it did. The game broke the release cycle, and its overall reviews were not good. But to be fair, it did hit 10 million copies in its first year. Despite that, the Far Cry brand has always remained strong. That said, I still have faith in Far Cry 7. One underwhelming game is not enough to ruin my experience with the overall franchise. While Far Cry 6 did not meet expectations critically, I don't expect them to give up on the franchise because I see Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed and Far Cry as their three golden franchises, and very valuable ones at that. So instead, they're making moves to refresh the series whilst also trying to recapture what made games like Far Cry 3, 4 and 5 so massively successful. And based on everything in this video, it does kind of feel like a Far Cry 5 style game could return with Far Cry 7. So in this video, I'll go over some new leaks regarding Far Cry 7 and also everything we currently know about the game as of right now. Knowing my luck, Ubisoft will either announce the game or a major leak will surface right after this video goes live. If you do enjoy this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and without further delay, let's get right into it. So first of all, as I said in the intro, Far Cry 7 has not officially been announced, but rumors can pinpoint that it seems like it's currently in development under the codename Project Blackbird. Back in late 2023, Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming, who needs no introduction, did say it was originally scheduled for a fall 2025 release. However, 1 year later, he wrote that it had reportedly been delayed to 2026 due to development challenges. Now, unlike the previous entries, Far Cry 7 is set to introduce a radically different approach to pretty much a lot of things, such as storytelling, gameplay mechanics, and even the technology behind the actual game. Now, who's actually developing the game? Well, Ubisoft Montreal is the studio leading the development of Far Cry 7. Now, I have to acknowledge that Ubisoft as a whole right now is in a mess, and in my opinion, they have been putting out fairly mediocre games since 2018. However, it's important to understand that Ubisoft is not just one massive company where all 20,000 employees work on the same projects. It's a parent company overseeing multiple sub-studios, including Montreal, Quebec, Bordeaux, Toronto, Paris, and among others. Now, the reason I said that is because that distinction matters. Ubisoft Montreal is one of the few genuinely good sub-studios they have. They're responsible for some of their best games, including Far Cry 3, 4 and 5, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed Origins, Watch Dogs, and a few more. However, one important thing to note about Far Cry 7 and Ubisoft Montreal's approach is that the game is reportedly being designed to break away from the traditional Far Cry formula, the very structure that has defined the series for over a decade. Now, one of the biggest changes coming to Far Cry 7 is the transition from the Dunia Engine to Snowdrop. If you don't know, the Dunia Engine was the engine that was used in Far Cry 2, and ever since then it's been used pretty much in every Far Cry game after. But with Far Cry 7, the series will switch to the Snowdrop engine, the proprietary engine used in games like The Division, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and Star Wars Outlaws. Aside from not being the best games, those games I mentioned were visually nice looking games. Now, this switch will likely lead to improved graphical fidelity, better performance, and of course more dynamic environments. Now, moving very quickly away from Far Cry 7 for just a very brief moment, Ubisoft are also developing a separate multiplayer-focused Far Cry game, internally codenamed Project Maverick. This game is described as an extraction-based shooter set in the Alaskan wilderness, where players will have to survive against wild animals, harsh weather, and other players. This was also originally planned for a 2025 release, but reports suggest that the development has faced setbacks, pushing it back to 2026. And going back to Far Cry 7, let's talk about some of the juicy details, the rumored story and setting. So Far Cry 7's story structure is one of the most notable departures from the previous games. Unlike the past entries which followed a structured mission-based progression, Far Cry 7 will feature a non-linear story focused on rescuing family members from a dangerous cult. The main plot revolves around a wealthy family that has been kidnapped by a conspiracy cult known as the Sons of Truth. Now instantly, what does that remind you of? Because to me that sounds like Far Cry 5, and given that I loved Far Cry 5, I'm all for it. But here's a deal breaker to many people. So with this story, you will have a limited amount of time to rescue your family members before it's too late. The game features an in-game timer of 72 hours, or 24 hours in real time, which continues counting down unless you, the player, enters a safe house. I've seen many people not intrigued by this idea, and I don't blame them. It doesn't really sound that appealing in my opinion, but it is a rumor after all, and it is easily subject subject to change. Each family member can be rescued in any order, and some may not survive depending on the player's choice. If certain family members die, it will affect the overall story and the ending. Pretty much the ultimate goal is to defeat the Sons of Truth and save as many as your family members as possible. That's a very Seed family storyline in my opinion. Same with Joseph, Faith, John and Jacob from Far Cry 5. Now recently, in fact a week ago, a recent casting call leak appeared on the Gaming Leak subreddit, which often does at times have quite reliable leaks and rumors. Now this leak provided additional insights into the game's characters. So your kidnapped family is called the Bennett family, and your family consists of these people: Layla Bennett, Dax Bennett, Bree Bennett, Christian Bennett, Henry Bennett and Krista Bennett. The description suggests that there will be internal conflicts within the family, and are described to be very reminiscent of the power struggles seen in the TV series Succession, which I haven't really watched, so I have no idea. This could mean that not all family members are entirely trustworthy, adding some sort of inner conflict to the game's story. According to the same leak, one of the main villains is a man named Ian Duncan, described as a conspiracy theorist with a cult-like following who represents the wealthy elite. Now to me that sounds like a rich Joseph Seed. Both are pretty much conspiracy theorists and both have a cult-like following, so this could make him a villain with personal motives instead of, the typical warlord or dictator seen in the past Far Cry game. Anton Castillo of course being the most recent example of a villain that was just generic. Now other notable characters in Far Cry 7 include John McKay and Dr. Safna Kazan, who as of right now, their roles remain unclear. Now, when it comes to where Far Cry 7 will take place, this is where it gets quite interesting. The same leak mentions New England multiple times, suggesting that the game might take place in a fictionalized version of the northeastern United States. This would definitely be a drastic shift from the tropical islands and war-torn countries that we saw in Far Cry 6, giving us a new environment with dense forests, rural towns and colder climates this time. So if this is true, this would also align with the survival-focused gameplay changes coming to Far Cry 7. I for one am somebody that prefers North American settings in video games. I don't really know why. I think it's just, grassy environments or mountainous spaces that make it appeal to me more, instead of, a war-torn Cuba. Now let's talk about the gameplay changes coming to Far Cry 7, because this is when the game really starts to feel like a major shift for the franchise. One of the biggest new additions is the interrogation system, which introduces a kind of level of uncertainty when dealing with enemies. Instead of just marking enemies on your map like in past games, you'll now have to extract information yourself, and there is no guarantee it'll be accurate. When interrogating an enemy, they might tell the truth and give you useful intel, or they could lie to you to mislead you, stay silent or even try to escape. This feels more dynamic and unpredictable when it comes to gathering information, which sounds interesting as it feels more organic instead of, just a routine checklist. Another major change is the movement system, which has been completely overhauled. Far Cry 7 is introducing tactical sprinting, sliding and vaulting, making movement more fluid and responsive. This suggests that Ubisoft is taking cues from modern shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield, adding a faster, more refined way to traverse the world. It's definitely a notable shift from the clunkier movement of previous Far Cry games, and it might even make the gameplay feel more engaging, which has been a criticism for a long time. But it doesn't stop there. The inventory and looting system is getting a major expansion as well. It appears to be borrowing elements from survival games, where players will need to scavenge for resources to stay alive. Given that Far Cry 7 features a time-limited mission structure, resource management will likely play a much bigger role than in past games. You'll have to be smart about what you pick up, when you use it, and how you prepare for your next encounter. It's for sure a shift away from the more simplified open-world gameplay of past Far Cry games, where you could stockpile supplies without much thought. And speaking of time pressure, this is one of the most drastic changes rumored to Far Cry 7. I touched upon this earlier in the video. The game features a 72-hour in-game time limit, which translates to 24 real-time hours. That means you cannot just leisurely explore the world like in past Far Cry games. You'll need to prioritize certain objectives, carefully plan actions, and be mindful of how much time you're spending on side activities. The only way to pause the timer is by entering a safe house. It completely changes the typical Far Cry formula, and I, alongside many others, do have a big concern about that. But hopefully they don't go through with this, because this is just a rumor after all. I feel like for games like Far Cry, you do not want to rush things, so this seems like the complete opposite. So there we go, that is currently everything we know about Far Cry 7 from rumours and leaks. I think we can all see that the Far Cry series has been struggling in recent years. Well then again, it's really just Far Cry 6 that struggled. While Far Cry 5 was a massive commercial success, the franchise hasn't seen the same level of critical acclaim since Far Cry 3, which sets such a high standard. I do think Ubisoft desperately needs to refresh the series, and Far Cry 7's new structure and mechanics suggest that they are finally taking steps to do so. A non-linear story, a time-sensitive rescue mission, and survival-focused gameplay could make Far Cry 7 feel like an evolution instead of just another iteration to the series. However, there are definitely risks. Myself and many other Far Cry fans have come to expect certain things from the series, such as the over-the-top villains, large open-world exploration, and emerging chaos. So there are definitely people that might not like the structured, time-limited approach of Far Cry 7. What do you think about Far Cry 7 from everything rumored and leaked? I know a lot of people are put off by Ubisoft, and a lot of it is rightly so, but given Ubisoft Montreal's track record, I wouldn't put it past them to give us another Far Cry-esque game, because remember, Far Cry 6 was developed by Ubisoft Toronto, whereas 3, 4 and 5 were Ubisoft Montreal.